I'm JB. This is the Back It Up Binge podcast, and I'm talking with former major league pitcher, pitching coach, and Hollywood actor Jim Colborn. Jim, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Jeff. Quite excited.
Appreciate you being here. Big fan. Let's talk about that last part of the intro that I just said. Hollywood actor. You were in a major motion picture with a major star. Talk about that, how you got into it. What was the movie? Who was the actor you were in with?
Well, you're probably referring to my latest film, which is called For Love the Game.
Yes.
Featuring Kevin Costner. And a little known fact about that is I was his body double in the love scenes. But not everyone knows that, and they didn't give me credit. They would and shouldn't. It would ruin his image a bit. Actually, I met him one time. A neighbor of mine works with Kevin. Met him 6 months later, get a call. Says, would you like to come to New York to be, what they say, third base coach in a film? I went there, dressed up in a Detroit Tigers uniform, sat around Yankee Stadium for days on end doing nothing. And then occasionally we get a call to do a scene, go out, do the scene, do it about 5 more times, go in and have lunch. And at some point they said, come to the bullpen. And Colborn, come to the bullpen. And I think I was the only actor who knew what the bullpen was, so that's probably why they asked me. Get there, and it's the scene where Kevin, as a pitcher in the movie, had cut his hand, and he's trying to come back.
Yeah.
And so they say, just act like a pitching coach would. He's throwing. He says, I can't feel it. I can't feel it. So I do what I think I normally do. Use the seams. I am. He says, and fires the ball at me, and I catch it. Oh, that's good, says the director. One more time. We did the same thing. Bingo. It's in the movie.
That's great.
And so, yeah. And that was one of my lines. Well, no, that was my only line. Yep.
That's great. That was on the other night. I was watching. I was looking out for it. I didn't realize that was you in the bullpen. I know exactly the scene you're talking about. So let's go back to the beginning. You grew up in California. You were the captain of your football, baseball, and basketball teams in high school. What was your favorite sport to play, and who was your favorite athlete growing up?
Honestly, my favorite sport was basketball.
Okay.
And I was probably best in that, except I was 6 feet tall and didn't have the vertical ability that better players do. And but I did play in college and did pretty well. Favorite player at the time was probably Sandy Koufax, Don Drysdale, and some of the other Dodger players in that era.
You go to Whittier College. You have a successful career there. You major in sociology, but you don't get drafted. So talk about how you go from not getting drafted to getting a deal with a minor league contract.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre too. The only time I was approached by a scout said to me, "Hey, you got a pretty good arm." He saw me throwing in the bullpen. You got a pretty good arm. You ever think about playing pro ball? And I said, sure, I've thought about it, but I didn't think I was good enough. And I was a scout later in my career for quite a while. And if I'd heard a kid say that, I'd have kind of had doubts about his confidence, but whatever. So the school year ended. My baseball player friends went home. I called up another coach in our league that I knew had contacts in pro baseball, and he said, well, I can send this scout friend of mine over to Whittier College. And I said, oh, great, okay. Trouble was our catchers had all gone home, so there wasn't a catcher. My first baseman was there, and I asked him, would you mind catching me? He said yes. He got out there with his first base glove, squatted down behind home plate. I started firing pitches in, and he's commentating on the pitches. Whoa, God. Ooh, that's a good. Oh, did you see that curveball break? Oh my God. This scout's some dummy or something is going to be fooled by what a first baseman catcher's saying. So I showed him enough, and the scout was named Gordon Goldsberry. He's with the Chicago Cubs, and he says, "Well, I'll set up a game on Sunday with this semi-pro team." I went over and pitched for them and did really well. I think 5 innings, no, 10 strikeouts, and after the 5th, he said, "That's enough. Yeah, we're going to sign you." And, whoa, you're shitting me. And so here you're going to get a bonus. It's going to be $400. Honestly, that was wonderful. I was looking for a summer job, and I wanted to play baseball too, and here it was wrapped into one. So he signed me for $400, and off I went to Lodi, California, in the California League. And I couldn't believe my second baseman at Whittier College was quite good. He could really turn the double play. He weighed 119 pounds. And I walked into the hotel where I was meeting the team, and some of these guys' arms weighed 119 pounds. And I was astounded at what these athletes look like. But that's how it started, and started in Lodi.
But describe your pitching style. You had the animated catcher there when you were sort of trying out. But what was your go-to pitch? What was would you top out if they had a gun during your career? What was your go-to pitch? What was your style?
Well, they didn't have guns there, or I don't even know if they had color TV. But I would say you look at the stats and very few strikeouts. And I think my goal is always to just pitch to contact. And I just remember when I think back on my pitching strategies, it was to pretty much have them hit the ball by the 3rd pitch. So you kind of threw a strike one, and then you set them up with something, and then threw something they'd either hit off the end of the bat or it would jam them. And for the most part, I can remember trying to get strikeouts, like a man on 3rd and 1 out or something. And that was a little different. You'd run the count a little deeper and then get to some pitch, which maybe if it was a right-hander, I'd drop down and throw a sidearm slider or something like that. But I think my strengths were great command and 2 different fastballs, one that had a little ride to it, 4-seam you'd say, and one was a sinker. So that would be something you could run in on the right-hander's fists or have a left-hander hit it off the end of the bat. But the other key was that I had a pitch I could get over any time when I was behind in the count that was not a fastball. So they're looking for a fastball and on 2-0 counts or 3-1, and I could throw a slider anytime over the plate. So that was probably, if I had a go-to pitch, that would be it if I was behind in the count, or 3-2 even. But I didn't try for strikeouts, and you're going to ask me about the complete games, and that's probably why there were a lot of complete games.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I'm curious about that because that era is gone. But you're signed in '67. You're called up in 1969. Your first start was July of '69. You get a win against the Phillies. What are your recollections about standing on the mound for your first start?
That's another good one. So I showed up at Wrigley Field on a Friday,
right
before the game, and I wasn't to pitch till the second game of Sunday's doubleheader. I had never been to a big league camp. I didn't know one major league player on the Chicago Cubs. I'd never seen a big league game live except from the stands. So in retrospect, I probably should have been sitting on the bench absorbing the atmosphere and the rhythm of the game. But instead, Leo Durocher tells me, why don't you go inside with Bill Hands and Ferguson Jenkins and watch the game on the video, the TV, and see how to pitch to these guys. Well, knowing what I know now, you don't want the kid that's coming up to be thinking strategy and all that. You want him to be relaxed. So by the time Sunday second game rolled around, it's my turn to go out into Wrigley Field for the first time. And yeah, they'd already played one game, and the fans had consumed quite a bit of beer because they were pretty raucous. I normally took me about 11 or 12 minutes to warm up. I got ready in 6 minutes because I was just getting the ball and throwing it back and getting the ball, throwing it back. So nervous and excited. And walk out to the mound. The ball's sitting there. I reached down to pick it up with my glove, and I dropped it. So I'm shaking, and I reached down. All right, I'm going to reach down my hand. Reached down in my hand. I kicked the ball off the mound onto the grass.
Wow.
So now I had to walk off the dirt onto the grass to pick up for the first pitch ball. And the back of my mind, I'm thinking, everybody in this place is looking at, there's that kid. That kid's here. What's he doing? And threw the first pitch and kind of figuratively closed my eyes, wondering if they'd hit it clear across out of the bleachers. But he took it for a strike, and I couldn't. It was the worst game I pitched the whole year, because normally I threw spots and got ahead of the hitter, but I was just rearing back, throwing as hard as I could, and they were going everywhere. But somehow got through 5+ innings and had a lead, and I didn't deserve it, but I got a win.
Well, there you go. There you go. You mentioned Chicago, and you played for Leo Durocher. What was he like in Chicago to play for Leo Durocher?
Not good.
Okay.
He didn't like young players, and he didn't like, let's say, educated people. And I walked in, and I was one of maybe three of the players that have been to college. And right away I had some strikes against me. And for instance, here I am. When I was on the bench eventually, and I was trying to cheer for the team, and I'd go up to, let's see, the near end of the dugout closest to home plate, which is where Leo stood. And I'm yelling and clapping, "Come on, Sato. Come on. Let's go, Billy. Hit one. Come on, Ernie." And Leo finally turns around and says, "Get down to the other end." First of all, I stand and he stands in front of me. I move back over. He moves in front of me again. So what the hell is this? Anyway, finally he tells me to get out of here, and which was really against all my instincts of being a team member.
Right.
What else? Well, I guess the killer was that they had to elect a player rep. They elected Hank Gary, but he was the veteran. But they said, well, let's get a young guy in there as the assistant player representative. And so they nominated me, and I won. And so nobody else was running. And pretty soon, a couple months later, Hank Gary gets released. So here I am, a rookie in the big leagues with maybe 3 months experience, barely know my teammates, know nothing about what the players union is, and I'm the player rep. And it's about that time we're going back to New York and having these meetings with Marvin Miller and all these heroes in baseball that I admired, Tom Seaver and Wes Parker, Reggie Jackson, all these guys that I really looked up to. And I doubt if I ever said a word in any of those meetings. And I had to make some kind of vote for our team, and once again didn't know a thing about what this job entailed. I did know the players would ask me from time to time for insurance forms. So then they asked me on the road. So I would take them in a briefcase and a case and hand them to them. And one point, Leo says to me, "Hey, you know, you look like one of Mr. Wrigley's damn lawyers coming on the bus with that briefcase." And yeah, I mean, I didn't have a chance. The killer was one time we went to the West Coast for a series against the Dodgers and the Giants, and all our starters got killed. Ferguson, Jenkins, Bill Hands, Milt Pappas, Ken Holtzman. And when they came back, we were in the outfield for our first batting practices, and the bullpen guys are over there with, again, they're a bunch of veterans like Phil Reagan and Hank Gary and Ted Abernathy. And they're talking about this article in the paper where Leo had been asked, "Hey, how come you didn't use your bullpen out on the West Coast when your starters were getting killed?" And he says something to the effect, "Well, these are my best pitchers, so I'm using them." So our bullpen crew says that's BS. Somebody should tell him what's wrong with us. Yeah, Reagan, go tell him. I ain't gonna do it. You do it. So they had me confronting Leo Durocher once again, and I just said, "Leo, what's this about? You said in the paper where we're not as good at pitchers as these other guys." He goes, "Wait a minute. You a better pitcher than Ferguson Jenkins?" "No." "You a better pitcher than Ken Holtzman?" "Well, I don't think so." "You a better pitcher than Bill Hansen?" I said, "Well, maybe." And with that, he stood up and marched into the clubhouse. Opens the door, yells to the whole clubhouse, "This fucking kid thinks he can run my club. He thinks he's going to tell me what to do. Well, you can go down to Tacoma," that was our AAA team, "and you can pitch down there if you think you're so good." So I just put my head down between my legs, and guys come over. "What happened? What'd you say?" I said, "Should I just pack my bag or what?" "No, I'll go out for infield practice." But then a couple of them come over and say, "Hey, if you get sent down and they ask you about it, tell them what's going on here. Tell them about Leo." So to me, it was a commentary on why the '69 Cubs didn't win. They didn't have good leadership. Leo was a detriment. And when a kid that's less than a rookie is asked to tell about what's going on, it ain't good.
No, it's not. But after 2-3 years in Chicago, after the 71 season, you're traded from the Cubs to Milwaukee. Was that friction part of it, or did you ask for a trade? How did you wind up being traded?
Oh, well, I'd say if Leo had a say in it, it'd be yes. He would probably want to get rid of me, because he sent me down after that confrontation. I did go back to Tacoma after a couple of weeks. And I'd had a decent year the prior one, so I guess I was in his doghouse. But I was in winter ball, and the Dodgers had sent Bill Russell to Venezuela to learn the shortstop position. And they sent Tommy Lasorda with him to coach. And Lasorda called me up one night and said, "Hey, you've been traded to Milwaukee."
Wow.
And I didn't really know the first thing about Milwaukee, to tell you the truth, and being in the other league and all. But it was an opportunity eventually.
Well, second season in Milwaukee, it all comes together for you in 1973. You're a 20-game winner, 20-12, 36 starts, 22 complete games, all-star team, 314 innings pitched. Why did it all come together for you in that season?
Um, I think I finally relaxed. Well, one element was in spring training, they asked me to throw a certain pitch, and I messed it up. And when I came in the dugout, the manager Dave Bristol says, "Hey, that's okay. Get them next time. This isn't Chicago." And so, whereas you wouldn't get that kind of any kind of stroke or positive feedback or encouragement in my role with the Cubs. And so, number one was I was relaxing into that kind of role, and then the second thing was well, Del Crandall was the manager in '73, and one spring day, he says, "What's wrong? You look like you're down." He says, "Ride with me to the other town." And I told him, "Look, I should be starting, and I can do as good a job as these guys you got going out there." And he says, "Well, unfortunately, that's our decision, not yours. But I'll tell you this, that hopefully you'll get enough chances to prove us wrong." So that year, I started in the bullpen, and with the attitude that, hey, I'm better than these guys that are out there. Just give me a chance. And finally, there was one pitcher that was just kept getting shelled. It was a four-man rotation in those days. So there were probably three starts in a row where I had to come in and relieve him early. And the last one was no outs in the first inning and the bases loaded. And so I gave up his 3 runs and then pitched the shutout the rest of the way, and then got to start the rest of the season. And that was in first part of May. But technically, I think I got confidence in that sinker that the Cubs had made me learn, and the slider thrown it for a strike. And that was the key. If I got behind, I could always throw that pitch.
314 innings pitched that season, 224, 206, 225, 239 after that. I mean, how were you geared up to pitch that many innings? Was your arm hanging at all? Did you have any injuries? Because now they don't even go 100 pitches. 6 innings is a great outing for them now.
I don't know. I think a couple elements of that. Number one, at its prime, my right arm was probably worth $80,000. Nowadays, these pitchers' arms are worth 14 million or more.
Right.
So they're a little more careful with their investment. Another element that has to be thought about is that the diagnostics now are, infinitely better than they were then. If you had a sore shoulder, you iced it, maybe rubbed it, put some hot stuff on it, did ultrasound, maybe skipped a start, and then off you went. And the other part is, at that time, if you faltered, you lost your job.
Okay.
So you damn well you weren't going to say if anything was really bad. And I never really had an injury. And at the time, they didn't have massage. They'd give you a rub down maybe before you went out to pitch, and that would have helped. We did ice after the game, but that was it. There was not weight training for pitchers except for maybe these Job exercises, which are 5-pound dumbbells that you lift up in different exercises. But my attitude all the way from high school to college into the pros was, it's my day to pitch. I'm going to pitch the whole game. And if I didn't, it was very disappointing. And then another element, sorry to keep rattling on, but another element is when you pitched in the first few innings, you didn't use the pitches that you knew you were going to need if there was a jam in the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And now, if you notice, they go out and go right after the hitter's weaknesses right from the beginning, knowing that a guy with a different slant is going to come in to pitch to his weaknesses later. But I knew in the back of my mind that I had to save something. If I had Yastrzemski up there in the seventh with 2 men on, I better not have shown him the pitch I wanted to get him out with. So those were some of the elements, I think.
Yeah, you answered one of my questions. The approach: 22 complete games in that season, 30% of your starts were complete games. So that was the mentality back then. Give me the ball. I got to get to 9. You get to 6 or 7. It's not a great outing then, I assume.
Oh, yeah, it was the way I looked at it. 9 was my goal. If I did 8, that was an A minus. 7, depending on how many runs I gave up, was a B or B plus. And if it was below 7, it was going to be a C or less. And would you say I completed 30%?
Yeah, it was 60 out of 204.
Oh, overall, geez,
Yeah,
no
overall,
kidding.
30%. In that one season, 22 of the 36 starts were complete
Huh.
games. Yeah, so a lot of almost
Boy,
every season you had at least 3 to 10 complete games. Yeah, I mean, you went out there and you logged in. I mean, look at that stretch: 314, 224, like we talked about. It's incredible. I mean,
I'll
that,
tell you one thing, Jeff. In that 1973 season, on July 1st I started, and then the All-Star break came. I pitched every fourth day from July 1st to the end of the season, even if it was an All-Star game or a rainout or something. I just kept getting plugged in. And another thing I was kind of proud of is there was a stretch of 9 games, no, 11 games. So it would have been 99 innings, and I'd pitched 94 out of the 99 innings.
wow.
So, it doesn't mean I'm a superhero, but it just shows the mentality was radically different then.
Oh,
That's
absolutely. And you
all.
made the All-Star team that year. So you were the first 20-game winner, I believe, in Milwaukee Brewer history. That season, get you an All-Star nod. What was it like walking into that room, being part of that whole, All-Star few days?
I was scared shitless again. And I mean, then they had me by this guy that I'd heard of. So his locker was next to me. His name was Nolan Ryan. And thank God he spoke to me a little bit. But I just felt totally out of place. And what am I doing here? Uh, the Oakland A's management were the managers and pitching coaches that year because they had won the previous season, and their pitching coach was Wes Stock, who had been the Brewers pitching coach, and he knew me. And I think he kind of wanted to get me in the game because in the ninth, I did my normal warm up. It was the second day after a start, and I would have started 2 days later after that. So I did a normal bullpen session and was ready to come in the game, but didn't. But in the ninth, they hollered for me to come from the bullpen into the dugout. Says, "Get a helmet. If this guy gets on, you're going to pinch run." I said, "Holy shit! Okay, at least I can run." But the guy struck out, and I didn't get in the game.
So another special season for you was 77. You're traded to the Royals. You had a successful season: 18-14, 3.62 ERA, 35 starts. Two things in that season I want to ask you about. Something special happens by you on May 14th. You're playing the
Oh,
Rangers. You throw a no-hitter. Talk
yeah,
about that night. I mean, you probably start the game, you get through a few innings, you're in your groove, there's no hits. Then where do you start realizing you got a
yeah,
no going, and are people avoiding you in the dugout and all that stuff that goes
yeah.
along with it?
Yeah, everything you said is right. It was an unusual day because by that time I had a pretty strict regimen of routine for the day I started. My wife protected me from the kids and stuff like that. And but that day, a former teammate who now lived in Kansas City asked me to come to his baseball camp. And so during that morning, I went out to the baseball camp and whatever, coach kids around a little bit. So it was it was kind of freeing or relieving, really, to do something different and just go out and pitch. When I went out to the field during our batting practice, I know I was so calm and everything seemed in slow motion. In fact, a line drive came at me about at my feet, but I looked at it and reached up and caught it real easily on a half hop. And I said, "Oh, that was pretty cool." And but that was what happened. The game just went slow, and I guess I had much better focus and concentration than I had optimum focus and concentration that day. I was a little motivated because we'd had a fight with the Texas Rangers a few weeks prior, and I was pissed off at them. And in my mind, and I'm saying, I'm going to show you. And so that went into it. And you're right. After 3 innings, I looked up and said, "Huh," and it was with a sarcastic thought. "Well, what do you know? You didn't allow a hit after 3 innings for once." And it went on about the 6th inning. There was a 2-out sinking liner to center, and Al Cowens came in, and instead of, I guess normally we had a lead, so I think he would be cautious, catch it on one bounce and throw it in, and it's still 2 outs. But he just accelerated through it and caught the ball about knee high. It wasn't any, spectacular. It was just a good determined jump and a determination to catch the ball. But it flashed into my mind, and God, these guys really want this. So that kind of gave me a jolt. George Brett wasn't playing third base like he normally does. And sure enough, nobody said anything, but George came over. He always, when he gave me the ball from third after an out thrown around the infield, he'd always come over and say, "How you feeling?" I said, "Oh, so." And he said, "Well, you look shitty." And he'd go back to third base. And this time he came and sat by me on the bench and said, "How you doing?" And I said, so. And he goes, "Well, you're doing good. Keep it up." Something like that. Anyway, so that was the only guy that said anything. The other kind of remarkable thing was in the 9th, they sent a pitch hitter up who was Davey May. He'd been my teammate the prior 5 years in Milwaukee. And I'm thinking, oh man, at least he's going to lay one. He'll give it to me. Here's one easy out. First pitch, he hits a home run foul down the right field line. I said, "Holy cow! I mean, I got to work for this out too." And he eventually flied out. And then the last batter was a guy named Claudell Washington, and he's a low fastball hitter. And I started him and in my mind, I always thought if I ever got near a no-hitter, I would walk somebody before I'd throw him a pitch that he'd hit. And so I was trying to throw it low, and in the outside corner, it was right down the middle, exactly in his sweet spot. And he took a mighty rip, and he was perfectly timed on it, and he fouled it straight back over the catcher's head to the netting, which means he was right on it.
He was zeroed in on that.
Yeah, and I said, "Oh, I got away with that one." And eventually he grounded out to first.
Claudell was a great player for the A's too. And I have to tell you, when I was doing some research on your career, I saw this no-hitter, and I'm addicted to the old This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen. I said, let me go back and find the episode of Jim throwing a no-hitter because I want to see what Mel Allen says. And I can't find the episode.
Well, I can't I they didn't. They sent a TV crew out in about the sixth or seventh, and somewhere I probably have uh, those innings. I don't know if I do or not, but yeah, it's a shame that they wasn't on TV or something.
The second question I have for you from that season, right? Whitey Herzog's your manager. The Royals are always making the playoffs in the 70s and eventually losing to the Yankees. You have a great season. You pitched a no-hitter, but they go and they exclude you from the playoffs. Like, what
Yeah,
was the thought process? I thought I read somewhere where they wanted all lefties or something like that.
yeah. That's probably what happened because uh, Gura, Larry Gura was a left-hander, and he wasn't normally a starter. Uh, and Andy Hassler, I believe, another left-hander, and Splittorf, and then our best pitcher was Dennis Leonard, and he started, and in fact, they even brought him in the last game to try to finish the game in the ninth, and so that was it. And that Whitey did tell me after the game that said, "Well, I had you planned to start the first game of the World Series against the Dodgers if we'd have got in there." Because they have a lot of right-handers. That's what he said. Because they have a lot of right-handers. So that the next season, I pitched against the Yankees and I threw a two-hitter. And in my mind, I said, "I hope you read that, Whitey."
Was that when you were on Seattle? Because you got traded the next season.
Yeah, yeah. I was on Seattle.
Did that did your exclusion from the postseason play anything into you getting traded to Seattle the following season?
Yeah, indirectly. I don't know if you want to hear this whole story, but it was the dumbest mistake I've made in my life. But a lesson learned. I had always had an agent, and I told the agent, this year I think I want to negotiate my contract myself. And in my mind, I was mad because I mean, if I search my subconscious, I was irked that I didn't pitch in that series. And it also after the season, Whitey comes out in the paper and says, "Well, we need a third starter behind Leonard and Splittorf," and that really I shouldn't. My policy was normally don't read the paper because it's either going to swell your head or it's going to get your mind screwed up. But I read it. I read that article and it screwed me up. And so I went into the Royals management with a chip on my shoulder, and they offered me a fine contract, and I kept saying no. And the general manager called me in one day and he says, "This is not a general manager talking to a player. This is a guy who likes you that's giving you advice. You need to sign this contract." In other words, he was saying, it's really going to go bad if you don't. And so I didn't. And wouldn't you know it, I did hurt my shoulder during that season and didn't tell anybody and kept trying to pitch. It was so stiff that I was at some point relegated to the bullpen, and I'd have to throw the ball endlessly against the wall to keep my arm loose in case I got called in the game. And went to Seattle with really my shoulder was limping, and I kept hearing people say, "Hey, you've lost a foot on your fastball. Hey, you're not pitching." Umpires told me, so players told me,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't, I didn't want to believe it because in your mind, you just no matter what's happening, you're gonna win the game and do what you have to do, which was a strength, but it ended up being a fatal weakness. And so that season, I did very poorly, and that one game against the Yankees was probably the only good game that season. I don't know.
With a bum shoulder, you still pitched 142 innings that year combined between the two teams.
Well, they weren't very good innings.
You had a 5.24 ERA.
Yeah, well, let's see. It's right there in black and white.
There you go. So, of the two, I would rule out, and you can tell me otherwise, the Cubs seem like not a great experience for you, but between the Brewers and the Royals, what was your favorite locker room to be in?
Both were very entertaining. The Brewers had a bunch of ribald characters, and it was kind of like anything goes. And subsequent to that, they were the Harvey Wallbangers, and they had quite a reputation for being crazy. And it kind of had started back when I was on the team. Really, we did a lot of crazy stuff and goofed around. And it was also an era where a baseball player was immune from public scrutiny. The police would protect you, and so we did some stupid stuff. One time we were playing cards in one of the high-rise hotels in New York, and they didn't have air conditioning. The windows were open. The guy got mad about his hand, and he grabbed the black and white TV that was sitting on the table there and threw it out the window.
Oh my gosh.
40 some floors up, but fortunately the cord stayed plugged, and we got it and pulled it back in. So what are you doing? uh, so I mean, it was that kind of stuff that you just thought you were immune. So that was the Milwaukee team. And when in Kansas City was a little more mature, a little more professional in all ways, but still some good guys and a lot of fun. And yeah, but you said Chicago wasn't a good. That was a great lesson. Those were the best players I ever played with.
Sure.
I don't know how many Hall of Fame guys came out of there, but we had the strongest team in the league, even though the Mets kept beating us. But that was because of probably our leader. Tell you the truth.
So you played a pitching coach in the movie, but you were actually a pitching coach for the Pirates and for the Dodgers. So you make the transition there. Looking back now as a pitching coach, was there, you work with Kevin Brown, Hideo Nomo, good names. Is there one pitcher that stands out when you look back? So that guy was so easy to coach. He was receptive, or vice versa. This player was tough to manage to coach.
Well, Eric Gagne was quite interesting. He was a very emotional guy, and if we didn't use him right, he'd grab me and take me in the back room and give me hell for this and that. And he did that several times, and then on my ride home, I'd always get a call. Hey, I'm sorry, Colby. Blah blah, and then we'd talk it out. Kevin Brown was very difficult to deal with. Uh, Poor guy. Yeah, I don't know. He had his own agenda, and it was very hard at times. But for the most part, um, people ask about, they assume major leaguers have these big egos and all, but I never felt like that was the case. And, I felt like more than anything, they needed pats on the back and explanations why they weren't being used or stuff like that. Nomo was Nomo was very interesting. He was pitching poorly, and Jim Tracy, the manager of the Dodgers, and I were wondering what to do because he was pitching his way out of the rotation. And we said, well, we can't send this veteran to AAA, the guy who's already thrown 2 no-hitters and whatever else he's done. And then how about bullpen? Well, just doesn't really fit out of the bullpen, does he? No, he doesn't. All right, well, at least got to talk to him and warn him. So Tracy calls Nomo into his office, and he says, Tracy did a great thing. He says, Hideo, if you were sitting here where I am and you had a pitcher pitching like you, what would you do? and Hideo had brought a translator in, and he said something briefly to the translator. Translator says, "Well, I guess if you have faith in a person, you have faith in them." And that was all. And we waited for something more. And he says, "That's it? Yeah, that's it." Okay. They got up and left. And he and I looked at each other and said, "Wow, that is the real challenge, isn't it?" He's got a point, but it still doesn't solve our problem. So we let him, but it worked somehow. The next 26 games, he threw 24 quality starts. He was just, he flipped a switch. It was like we kicked him in the butt, and he took off and became just our best competitor on the mound. He pitched, but in those days, a quality start was 7 innings with 3 runs or less. That's a quality start, not 5 innings. So
Yeah,
he pitched.
it was 7, not 6.
It was 7.
Wow, I didn't remember that. Wow, that's interesting.
Well, I could be wrong, but that's what was in my mind. He pitched 7 innings in 24 of the 26 starts, and there few with 3 or fewer runs allowed.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, he was a pleasure. There's a bunch of them that were just a pleasure to be around, and yeah.
I could talk to you about the history of the game for hours, but I want to wrap it up with the binge burner. I'm going to give you a bunch of guys that you played with, and just give me your initial
Okay.
thoughts on them. We'll just do a speed round here. And I have
This
to
sounds
ask,
like fun.
yeah, I have to ask you about this number one. I'm sure you get asked about him. Anyone who talks to you about baseball, and that's Hank Aaron.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Well, when he first came to Milwaukee, and they, like opening day, for instance, we all go out on the field, and he was the last one that the fans, the park was full. Why? Because they wanted to see Hank Aaron. They announced everybody's name, and finally, number 44, Hank Aaron, and everybody goes berserk. So we start whispering to each other, and we say, why don't they just introduce him first, do all that, and then say, and the rest of the Milwaukee Brewers. And so that was our first inclination. But we found out he was a bit of a jokester and had a good sense of humor. And when they had Hank Aaron Day, at one point, we went out and bought the winner of the Destruction Derby, which was, you could always hear it. It was only a few blocks away from County Stadium. You could hear him running around and see the lights from a few blocks away. So we got the idea, let's go over and talk to them and say, hey, could we buy the winning car from you? And he goes, yeah. He says, well, yeah, just return it the next day. So does it run? Yeah, it runs. And so it was an whole beat up car with yellow dents all over it. And so there's Bob Euchre. He's announcing up there, and now Hammer, your teammates have given you a real special gift here on your honoration night, and it's something you maybe could go hunting in. And so we drive it out on the field. In the meantime, it had been under the stadium, and we'd signed it. Like all the players had signed in big bold, and we put 715 home runs. Yeah, but how many strikeouts? And yeah,
Right.
how's your training program? And this and that. How many beers do you drink on the flight home and stuff like that? Anyway, we come rolling out from the left field gate along the warning track in front of home plate. Guys are leaning out the window, up on the fenders, waving and stuff. And he got a kick out of it. And we enjoyed doing it. See, there's another example of kind of attitude the Brewers had. It was
Yeah.
just anything goes, and he didn't train a lot. Yeah, once in a while get he'd get up and he'd say, "Hey, I'm going to run with you today." And we'd run about from foul line to foul line twice, and he'd say, "Ah, that's enough for me." And then I got to tell you this one story though. We were out in Los Angeles and playing the Angels, and he basically sat up in the clubhouse. He was a DH. He sat up there and read the paper and listened to Bob Uecker, so he knew when his time was. And then he'd mosey down and walk out
Right.
to the on deck circle and swing the bat a couple. He wasn't totally dedicated at this point. So in LA, I told him, "Hey, this kid, that guy that's pitching out there, he's from my hometown." And I had a talk with him. He says, "You're an easy out." I said, "You're past your prime and all." He goes, "He said that?" I said, "Yeah, I know the kid from whatever." And so he goes up, and you can see him pawing the ground, squeezing the bat, hits a home run.
Wow.
So I'm thinking, okay. So a few games passed. We're up in Oakland, and the next series, and I said, "I'll be damned, this is going around the league. This young kid says you're an easy out." He goes up, gets in the box, does a half swing and taps it back to the pitcher and jogs halfway to first, and goes in the dugout. A little while later, he comes up and says, "Hey, that pitcher didn't say that. I asked the catcher. Catcher said he's scared to death."
He got you.
Oh, so
Busted.
whatever. My motivating speech was short lived.
There you go. Here's a player that I'm going to ask you about, and I'm sure a lot of people don't remember the name or forget him. I'm going to ask you about him because I played first base in Little League and I had his glove, and that's George Scott.
Oh yeah, he was delightful. He had somewhat of a. It makes me laugh thinking about Boomer. Boomer, they call it. It was just Boomer. We called him. Everybody knew him as Boomer, and he'd talk with his lower lip down. I'm gonna give me some. I'm gonna give me some Aretha. What do you mean Aretha? RESPCT. I'm gonna get me some respect. And so he'd go up and hit a double. "I got me some Aretha there. I got me some Aretha." And we just joked, and yeah, he was a fun teammate, but he needed guidance. And one time the season had started. It was in April. He said, "George, you done your income taxes?" What's that?" I said, "God dang, man, you're making $100,000. Whoa, yeah. Well, anyway, I kind of had to help him do that. And anyway, fun. Good player, though. God, what a good hitter and a great first baseman.
So here's a name I've always heard, but I never saw him play. I just know the legend, Ernie Banks.
Yeah, I love that guy. Being all that background I told you about, being on the Cubs and feeling like I didn't belong, and having Leo on my ass. Get on the bus, and there's one seat empty, and it's next to Ernie, because everybody's kind of. I mean, he's respected by everybody, but I think Billy Williams was his only friend, close friend, where he felt they could talk about personal things. And he told me, "Sit down here, kid." He says, "How do you want to be remembered?" And I said, "Well, how do you want to be remembered by your teammates?" I just want them to know I go out and work hard and do my job every day. He said, "That's Billy Williams." I said, "You got to be like Willie Mays. You got to have some pizzazz. You got to have some pizzazz." draws it out real long. Like, and I understood what he was saying, have some flair and style, but boy, it sure wasn't me. And, he had it because, hey, let's play two. What's a great day for two? Where's the next game? And, it rolled off his tongue easily, but I was more businesslike and boring. But he did try to give me some good advice. And I'll tell you what, I felt so close to him that one time my wife and I invited he and his family to a dinner in spring training. And I'm sure they were floored that this kid would invite the family over and his wife would cook something. And in retrospect, it was a bold move, but that's how I felt. I liked him a lot and I thought he was a good person. Although one of the first games, my wife sat next to his in the stands, Elois Banks. And Elois tells my wife we'd been married probably a year, and she didn't know the first thing about baseball or professional baseball life. She gives my wife some advice. She says, "You got to watch out for them celebrity fuckers." My wife comes home and says, "Jim, what's a celebrity fucker?" And I don't know. I said, "Don't worry about it."
That's funny. Sound advice, right? Back then. So let's go back to a pitcher. Fergie Jenkins.
Wow. You're asking about great, interesting guys.
I mean,
He
you
was,
have a treasure trove of teammates that are just unbelievable. And you're in an era that is special to me because I think I sent it to you in my letter that I'm a 70s, 80s, 90s guy,
well,
especially the 70s. I love 70s
yeah,
baseball.
yeah. He was kind to me too, and was helpful a bit. And but I was just in awe. I just thought he was at this other level, and I was struggling down here somewhere. He just had a seriousness and intensity when he got out on the mound, and just kept. You talk about complete games and innings pitched. Check out his career. It's really something. But he had a great command and a great sense for how to pitch, and he had a good changeup. He could pitch to right-handers or left-handers, and yeah, he was impressive to be around. I just kind of it was nice when he spoke to me, but mostly I held him on a pedestal up there.
I bet. Last one. Let's talk about Ken Holtzman.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that guy was a mentor. He absolutely took me under his wing. In fact, he would come by my apartment and pick me up to take me to Wrigley Field for the games in the morning. We played all day games then, and he'd come get me. And then his wife was friendly to mine, and he made me feel at home. In fact, he was on the Oakland team in '73, and he kept campaigning with his manager to name me on the All-Star team. And finally, one day we were playing them. They were the visitors at County Stadium, and the dugout phone rang, and they said, "Colborn, it's for you." I answer, and it's Holtzman calling me from the other dugout. He says, "What was their manager? Forget who his name was now." Anyway, he says he's picked you for the All-Star team. Congratulations! And this is before I'd heard it officially. Uh, anyway, he was a kind guy. I'm sorry he's not around now, but anyway, yeah.
Jim, this has been an absolute pleasure for me. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing the history, sharing the stories. It's fantastic to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Appreciate it.
Well, I enjoy talking to people who don't know my stories anymore. they're They seem like news stories coming from the 70s.
There you go. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.